dimensional analysis type stuff here. Hopefully help you guys out with this bridge, okay? The first thing I'll say is when we talk about these bridge conversions, when we're just doing like meters to kilometers, for those of y'all who are pretty confident in math, if I tell you that, we'll say 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer, right? And so obviously if I said, hey, you have 10 kilometers, how many meters is that? Well, then if 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters and you have 10 kilometers, if we have 10 kilometers, then that's just 10 times whatever, how many meters that is, right? So 10 times 1,000 or 10,000 meters, right? So in the beginning, it's pretty easy, right? You might be like, well, why the heck do I need to use this bridge if I can just do that simple math calculation, right? Well, in physics, the bridge will help keep things organized for you, especially when you get into problems where you're going to be doing a multiple step conversion, right? And so I'll show you an example of that here in a second, but it does help for some of the more technical stuff, right? In the very beginning, if you're very good with the math and you know the conversion rate, then you don't necessarily have to do a bridge, right? But I wanted to show you guys, and hopefully this is familiar from chemistry, but I wanted to show you how you would use a bridge to convert, and then show you like a more advanced example that would make life a little bit easier using a bridge so you don't have to do so many calculations. And it also doesn't allow you as much room for a mistake, right? When you're trying to do the math in your head, mental math, or on paper, if you're not super organized, it can be easy in order to make a mistake, right? So let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and give me 1 second. Let's go ahead and copy this guy and put it in here. Okay, so let's say, we'll start simple, right? Let's say we've got 15.6 kilometers, and we want to know how many meters that is, right? And like I said, obviously if it's 1,000 meters per kilometer, you could do 15.6 times 1,000, right? But let's see how this bridge works so when it gets more complicated, it will make sense to us, right? So the first thing we do is in this top left portion here, right? Right up here. This is always going to be the given, right? This is the given unit or the given area, right? And so in this case, the given is 15.6 kilometers. So I put 15.6 kilometers up here, right? Now here's the trick for these bridges. This is the single most important thing. You remember this, you're going to be in good shape, right? You always want, remember in math, in order to cancel out, if I wanted to cancel out kilometers here, then I would have to have kilometers on the bottom, right? We'd have to divide by kilometers in order to make one or get rid of kilometers, right? And so the biggest rule is that the given unit always needs to match diagonally, right? So we've got kilometer here. So that means that diagonally, I need to have kilometers in here, okay? And so maybe a little bit more room here. So let's say we know that we're gonna want kilometer down here, right? And so generally, like in the beginning, I'd recommend, obviously you could write it all out, but I'd recommend just kind of going like this until you get used to it. So now we know that since kilometers is on bottom, that if I was to divide 15.6 kilometers by 1 kilometer, then it would just be 15.6, right? I would eliminate kilometers. But we want meters, right? So this top portion above kilometers is going to be for that conversion, right? And so this is where we know that we want to go to meters, right? And so now it's our job to say, well, how many meters per every kilometer, right? We wrote it up here. And so I'm going to say, well, there's 1,000 meters in every 1 kilometer, right? And so now you can clearly see why, 15.6 times 1,000 would get us the right answer. Because here when we do these bridges, you just multiply across everything and then divide by everything on the bottom. Or you can go one by one, right? You could do 15.6 times 1,000 divided by 1 times the next square if there was one, right? And so the most important thing for these is to know that these units diagonally have to match each time. So let's just say that I then wanted to go from here to millimeters, right? So this way I'm not having to do multiple steps. I can do it all in one. And so then once again, now kilometers has been eliminated and now we have meters. So that means that meters needs to be here for our next conversion, right? And so then, since we want to go to millimeters, we know that millimeters would now be on top, right? So the meters would cancel out and then we'd be left with millimeters. So then we would say, well, how many millimeters in 1 meter? That'd be 1,000. And so now we can see, well, then we'd multiply by 1,000 again in order to get how many millimeters are in 15.6 kilometers. So it'd be 15.6 times 1,000 times 1,000 divided by 1, right? And that would give us our total millimeters in kilometers, right? So super helpful here, right? And so then let's take a look at something a little bit more. Let's move this over a little bit. Right. Okay. And so let's look at something a little bit trickier, right? So let's say we want to go from 5.7 kilometers per hour to meters per second. So how many meters per second is 5.7 kilometers per hour? Well, now we have something on bottom, right? And so there's a couple ways you can handle this. You could wait and just try to get rid of kilometers first and then go back and do hours. But we're going to try it this way, right? We're going to say we're going to always put that given, and the 5.7 kilometers was given. And then down here, we're just going to write, and I'll write it in green for now, 1 hour. Okay, and so in order to eliminate go from kilometers to meters, we can still do the same thing we did before, right? So now I'm going to say, well, remember that I need to have diagonal unit here. So now this is going to be 1 kilometer. And then we know that this is 1,000 meters, right? And so then the kilometers would cancel. And so then if I was doing this, I would know that 5.7 times 1,000 would give me how many meters, right? So I'm in meters now. But if I was to write down my answer, that's meters per hour, right? That's not going to help me. I need meters per second, right? And so here you could rewrite, if you're one of us who wants to stay super, super organized, and you could start over.